A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our cases this week are about crimes against children by those who are in charge of their care. If you haven't seen the shocking video that police say shows a school aide hitting a boy with autism, then we will show it to you, and you will hear from his parents who insisted the video captured on the school bus be made public. Because the boy is nonverbal, he could not tell his parents about what was being done to him, but his bruises told the story. But first, we have another case of unbearable cruelty being inflicted on a little boy before his mother killed him. Police say she recorded a video of their last minutes while they were in a ditch. The mother was in a custody battle with the father and was taunting the father with threats of killing their son. Before she shot her son, she told the 3-year-old to, quote, say goodbye to daddy. Plus, we have a special guest at the end of the podcast, our friend, retired police officer Rich McHale, who is walking the Appalachian Trail to raise awareness for the 33-year-old cold case of missing 11-year-old Mark Heimbaugh, will be joining us. We're recording this on Wednesday, May 8th of 2024. Our guest today is Robert Corbett, a criminal defense attorney, a former homicide prosecutor, a legal commentator, and a dear friend of the show. Robert, it's always a pleasure when you are on. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on today.
Always, always. I know you're really busy. You just came back from court, so we're always very grateful when you can make some time in your busy schedule for us because we appreciate your insight into these cases. One thing I just, before we get into the very darkness of our cases, which are all about children, and this will be a difficult one for all of us to listen to this cruelty that has been inflicted on these children. At the end of this podcast, I want to leave you with a little bit of hope because many of you know who Rich McHale is. He's been on the program before. You all know that we both have worked a case of a missing 11-year-old boy from South Jersey, and that his case has never been solved, and it has always, always bothered us. But here's what I'm going to say. That case isn't solved, but Rich hasn't given up. He hasn't given up. He's taken an interesting turn as far as how he's gathering awareness and support for his case. And that's why I love doing these cases. And because it's all about hope for me. It is all about hope. So I will leave you with some hope. All right, let's get to this, Robert. Our first case is out of San Antonio, Texas, where the amount of violence that a 3-year-old boy has suffered at the hands of his mother is just it's just unbearable. I don't have enough words for this one. His mother forced him to say goodbye to his father in a video. This is before she killed the little boy, her son, and then herself. All of this, say police, it's because of a custody battle. And they were even supposed to be in court the next day. Robert, look, I understand there are moments during divorces and custody battles where one or both parties feel like, oh my God, this is the end of the world and I'm going to lose my child. But it's not the end of the world. This is the end of the world.
Yeah, this is a absolutely heartbreaking case. And, I have colleagues who practice family law and very often will commiserate and talk about, kind of jokingly, maybe who has the harder job to do. And one thing that always seems to be whenever you speak to someone who does family law is that they talk about the emotional toll these types of cases can take, how long they can take, how the custody battles can be so contentious. And I'm a criminal defense attorney, but when I get involved, it's when these types of cases have some type of criminal element, specifically when there is domestic violence alleged between the parties and or the children, when you get restraining orders in place. So this type of case is where you're dealing with someone where emotions are already high. And there may be some aspect of trying to get back or retaliate against another party. And it's very often, sometimes you see the children being pawns. And unfortunately, she took her own child's life seemingly an attempt to get back or retaliate against her soon-to-be ex-husband.
And the mother, according to police, was taunting the father throughout the day and will describe how the violence escalated. And there were so many opportunities to just stop. And look, maybe I don't know what was going to happen in court the next day. I don't know. And maybe it was all going to go against her. I don't know. But how is this the appropriate solution to this problem?
Yeah, and it's absolutely no way to justify, even if everything went completely against her in terms of she lost custody of her child, in terms of the dad got sole physical legal custody. She was only allowed to have supervised visit. There's absolutely nothing that would justify her going to this level, going to that point.
And I think, the violence here obviously committed against the little boy who lost his life. She took her own life, another violent act. And of course, the trauma that was committed on the father as he watched this, as she kept calling and texting and FaceTiming him. But, she didn't have to kill the baby. She didn't have to.
And when you mentioned, oh, sorry. And when you mentioned in terms of the escalation, just hearing the story, and this is just me in terms of experience of seeing certain types of cases and seeing things escalate. One of the things that comes to mind for me is there a mental health component that's going on? And that's not meant to mitigate or any type of excuse whatsoever. But for this to escalate, it makes me think that, and obviously to take your own child's life, makes me think that there is something that was going on with mom at that time or before that. And for her to continue to make the calls, there are warning signs that probably he saw or didn't want to think it would really go to this level, but signs that someone has seen, not only in that aspect in terms of the relationship with the son, but probably throughout that relationship in terms of something that would have caused someone concern.
Well, her family was concerned, and they had called the police and asked for a welfare check. But this moving crime scene was in motion, and unless someone could physically stop her and intervene, there was no stopping her on this day. There was no stopping her. So the mother here is 32-year-old Savannah Krieger. Savannah, again, was in a custody battle with her estranged husband, Brian, for custody of their 3-year-old son, Caden. And they had this court hearing the next day, which I guess that was the impetus for all of this, that whatever she feared, that fear so consumed her. Again, not in a rational manner. I have to think that she was not well. I often ask in these cases, is it mental illness? Is it evil? Is it a combination? There's no way you don't know that killing your son is not the right thing. I mean, there's just no way. There's just no way. So
yeah,
Savannah,
and when you say in terms of mental health or evil, and I don't use the term evil very often, and that's probably just because of, just seeing so much as a defense attorney and even, former prosecutor, you just see so much, and maybe on a certain level you get maybe jaded or used to seeing certain things. But when it involves a child, when it involves your own child, it's very easily for me to use that term. Evil coupled with some mental health issue as well.
Yeah. So Savannah filed for divorce on March 7th of 2024 this year. So just over a week later, then she got a restraining order, or was trying to get a restraining order against her estranged husband. Savannah apparently believed that her husband, Brian, had started a relationship with a woman that he met online, and that is why he moved out and he left them. So that seemed to be the source of her pain directed at the husband. And it does seem, based on her own words to him and what she did, that this was all directed at getting back at him. And poor little Caden was just collateral damage in this horrific battle. The unraveling began on March 18th. So it was about 1:15 in the afternoon. And after she left work, she went over to her estranged husband's home. Again, they're separated at this point. He's at work. He works at a car dealership. And police say that Savannah went into the home, trashed the place, and destroyed property. Okay, so that's her fury. That's her fury. Now, I will say, as horrible as that is, if you just stop there, again, this is going to go terribly wrong for you the next day in court. But that is a hell of a lot better than this ending.
And you can probably see that in terms of whenever we're dealing with some type of violent type of case, of where if people had that opportunity to just sit back, reflect, or even there's a time machine, allow them to go back, there are always points of where they could get off this highway, so to speak. But sometimes they're just so entrenched that they just can't seem to bring themselves to do that.
Yeah. You know what? Fantasize about trashing his place. Think about it, plan it all in your head, have it all live in here, and don't necessarily manifest it. But even if you do, even if she had just ended there, and it would have been costly in other ways, probably in the custody and divorce proceedings, still far better than how she finished this. So after she leaves her ex's place, then she goes back to her house. Okay, this is about 1:57. This to me is so telling. Again, this one she could have pulled off. And by that, I mean, she could have expressed her fury in her own home and no one really would have known about it. And she could have gotten it out. She took her wedding dress and the portraits of their wedding, put them on the bed and shot them. I mean, that tells you how angry she is. But again, had she just done that and be done and gotten it out of her system? And the little boy wasn't home at the time. So that's what I mean, that it would have been like, I think, a safe expression of your fury.
All right, something cathartic, but still wouldn't subject her son to having to see that.
Exactly. You wouldn't want the little boy to see this. Then, according to police, Savannah drove to Caden's daycare, and the daycare did confirm that mom checked Caden out at 2:33, and she was out of there by 2:42. The timeline is important, and we will explain why. Now, throughout this time, Savannah is sending threatening messages to Brian, her estranged husband, and also threatening to take the son. She is completely unraveled. I mean, she is from location to location. You can see the trail of destruction and violence. Then there is a 2-minute FaceTime call, which she has with her ex. And that's at 2:46 p.m. And he asked Savannah, why? Why did you destroy all of this? And she's driving apparently, or at least she's got Caden in the back seat in the baby seat. And and the mother says to Brian, who is very clever, he's accepting the FaceTime call, and then he is also recording it with another phone. So there was evidence of this, which I'm thinking in his head, he's like, I have a court hearing tomorrow, and this is going to be evidence for the judge as to why I need to have custody of the child. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think he ever thought that she would really kill their son.
Right. Just looking for something to corroborate what he was potentially going to tell the judge the next day in court.
Yeah, but very important that he did, because it helps us piece in what was going on here. So she said to him, quote, "You left us for a piece of blank." Then she says, so Caden can hear, right? "Daddy left us for some woman he met on the internet." And then she says to him, "Explain to your son why you're not here." Very hurtful.
And those kinds of things in terms of not unusual when you go to domestic violence court or you're dealing with some type of custody issue in terms of what we said in terms of bringing the children needlessly or getting the children needlessly involved in those types of conversations. But even still, even though he's saying that she's just adding more fuel to the fire, he's thinking that, hey, this is stuff that I'm going to be able to use in our hearing to show why she may be unfit, unhinged, whatever word you want to use. But it never, he thinks, in his wildest imagination, does he think at this point it's going to escalate to where it did.
No, no. It's hard for us to think of our loved ones, or even if you don't love her anymore, but you married her at some point, you were in love with her, you had a child with her. So it's very hard for all of us to think that our parents could harm us, our children could harm us, our loved ones could harm us, our best friends. But yet they do. So then a little bit of foreshadowing on this FaceTime call where Savannah says, you don't have anything to go home to now. You really don't. You won't have anything at the end of the day. So it sounds like she had this plan. She was going to kill him, going to kill her son.
A very ominous statement for her to make to him. And, maybe at this point, alarm bells should be going off for him to think, not that she's going to probably think harm their son, but he's probably got to think, well, maybe is she talking about trying to harm herself? But something needs to be, or probably was going on at this time that he needs to reach out to others to do, like you said, this welfare check or get law enforcement involved.
But sadly, if you look at the timeline, which I said would be very important here, there wasn't a lot of time because the call that she made, this FaceTime call with all the threats, was at 2:45. By 3:00, she was in the park, ready to move on her next plan. That's 15 minutes. That is 15 minutes. So not a lot of time for police or others to find her and intervene. And that's what I mean about the timeline being so crucial here. She was working quickly, dangerously, violently, and quickly. So now she's at Tom Slick Park. It's 3:03 p.m. And Sheriff Javier Salazar picks up the timeline about 15 minutes later. This will be at 3:19. Let's play this clip from the sheriff's news conference.
At 3:19 p.m., Savannah's call history log shows another attempt to FaceTime her ex-husband. Savannah then sends her last text message, say goodbye to your son. At 3:21 p.m., Savannah's call history log shows yet another attempt to FaceTime her ex-husband. It appears that was an unsuccessful attempt. At this point, Savannah then records a 21-second video where she and Caden appear to be already seated at the drainage ditch where their bodies would eventually be found by law enforcement 19 hours later. Savannah instructs Caden to say bye to Daddy, which Caden does. Savannah also apologizes to Caden for his daddy not being there and then kisses Caden. At this point, and I can describe the video to you. We've seen the video here. There's nothing graphic about the video except for the fact that now, knowing what we know now about what happened in the moments thereafter, it's pretty obvious what's about to happen in the video. And so although it doesn't necessarily show, it seems to be pretty clear what her intentions are at that point.
So that's horrifying. She's trying to reach her ex and she's frustrated. So she records this video where, she's telling her son, say bye to Daddy, which is horrific. He's in a ditch with his mother. He's 3 years old. So, he's at a park, so he may not know exactly what's going on. And then the authorities say that she found some cartoons on her phone, I guess, to occupy him while she gathered, these thoughts in her head. It didn't stop her, though. It did not stop her. She shot her son first, and then she shot herself in the ditch. What do you do with this when, the dad has called police because someone's broken into his house, right? His estranged wife trashed his house, and now he's worried about his son's whereabouts, but there isn't enough time.
Yeah, so when we talk about timeline, one of the things that I wrestle with is what exactly, in terms of, does dad tell law enforcement, and does he put it in proper context of, I think something is about to happen with either my child's mother and or my child? Because we say, look, it's not a lot of time. You're looking anywhere between like 15, 30 minutes. But in exigent circumstances, emergency circumstances, law enforcement can contact your cell phone provider, and they can get this real time information to kind of see where the cell phone is. And they can't pinpoint it exactly in terms of your X marks the spot, so to speak. And this is me, my experience in terms of dealing with cell phone experts. The way they've explained it to me is that they can get you down to sometimes within a couple of meters, maybe 10, 20 meters, like so to speak. So they can get you in at least the general area vicinity, even if they can't tell you exactly where the cell phone is at the time. So if that was done, then that at least gives law enforcement to say, hey, we are looking for this vehicle. This is a potentially a dangerous situation, and they can narrow down the search location.
It's unclear only because when I look at the timeline, it makes me think that he was concerned and that, yes, he called police, but he returned home at 3:37. So remember, she's at the park by 3, and certainly we believe that by 3:30, they were both gone by this point, or very close to it based on this timeline, right? Not a lot of time, or very close to it where, you'd have to move heaven and earth to try and find them, and it may still not have been fast enough. So he gets home at 3:37. That's when he found every article of clothing that he owned had been cut. And he calls law enforcement, and he reports Savannah for criminal mischief. And then don't forget, Savannah's family has contacted the police for a welfare check because she had stopped responding to their calls and their messages. She was communicating with Brian without question, but not with her own family because, of course, they would have stopped her. They would have known what was up. Somehow you just know something's not right and is potentially dangerous. So here's the troubling part. He does tell police what's happened, but I don't think everyone connects the dots that she could possibly do anything as horrible as she did, because it wasn't until 7 a.m. the next morning that an Amber Alert was issued for the little boy. And I gotta tell you, I'm kind of troubled about that.
Yeah, that's a lot of time that's elapsed. And when we say hindsight 2020, he's thinking of those conversations that they had prior to him going home and seeing the damage. But in the FaceTime conversations of where, telling him that, hey, you're not going to have anything to go home to, if he had thought at that point in terms of, hey, this could be potentially dangerous, or, at least for her, not necessarily my son, then that may have been time for law enforcement to contact the cell phone providers and try to see where they are. But it's so much easier to do Monday morning quarterbacking, so to speak, to see like what would have, could have, done, because there's always something you could do in hindsight. But in that moment, he probably just didn't think it was going to rise to that level. Obviously, he didn't think it was going to rise to that level.
And they would have had to act so quickly, and maybe they could have. I think it would have been tough, but perhaps not impossible. So that same day that the Amber Alert is issued for the little boy, that is when they find this very tragic scene, mother and son in a ditch, both dead, gun beside them, and it is ruled a murder-suicide. Here's the thing about cases like this. We talk a lot about on this program, what would justice look like? Because that's part of the discussion with these cases. And in a case like this, where the killer is dead, she has taken her son, there can be no justice. There's never going to be a trial. There's nothing. And what would a trial do anyway? What I'm saying is there's just no justice in this case. Absolutely zero.
Yeah, and I go back and forth in terms of when I talk to people about what exactly does that term mean. Because even if she hadn't taken her own life, then you say, okay, well, presumably she's going to get charged. She may have pled, or there may have been a trial. And even with a conviction, there's a finality with the court system but it doesn't obviously bring the son back. It doesn't ease the wound of the dad, anymore. He's still suffering from that for the rest of his life. So these types of cases, there are no winners. Everyone loses on both sides to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah. This whole thing is just so troubling. And the sheriff in his news conference, called out and said, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us, because the sheriff is saying that their real involvement having to do with the missing child didn't start till 7 p.m. that night. That would be the night before the Amber Alert, but hours after the murder and the suicide. So again, I don't know if it wasn't expressed in a way that law enforcement understood the severity of what was going on, I don't know. And again, trying to go back and fix this, I'm not sure would save anyone's life, sadly. But he did say, again, he said, please, I'd rather you bother us. If that's what you think, that it's like too minor a call, I'd really rather you call us. We go out and find out that everything's fine. That is a far better use of our time than having to then deal with the aftermath of not asking us to intervene soon enough.
All right. He'd have to say that he thought that his son's life was in danger in order for law enforcement to do what we were discussing in terms of contacting the cell phone company. Because even if he says in terms of, well, hey, she damaged, the home, damaged property, wanted welfare check, police could come out to the home and say, look, we don't see her, but she's the parent. She has the right to be with her son and take her son wherever she wants to. So I can see of how, even if you did contact law enforcement without more, you're not going to get that type of involvement for them to go that extra step to try to locate them without him giving them that information that he thinks they're in danger. And then even 3:30, that's too late. But, he could have still, in terms of once you start putting things together, once you get home, you see the damage to the home, and now you start thinking these are the troubling comments that she had made on the phone during the FaceTime call, then maybe he could say more to law enforcement. But based on the timeline we have, even then, that would have been too late.
Just such a sad, sad story. Our next case is out of Littleton, Colorado, and it is equally disturbing. Police there say that a camera on a school bus carrying special needs children captured a school aide punching children with autism. The school aide, 28-year-old Kiara Jones, has been charged with 11 counts, 9 charges of felony third-degree assault on an at-risk person, and 2 misdemeanor counts of child abuse. Kiara worked as a paraprofessional caring for the children on the bus on their way to school. We're going to show you the video. And for those of you who are listening, I will describe it to you. But cases like this undo me. We try really hard on this podcast to make sure that we discuss cases where the people who are the victims are our most vulnerable. Children with special needs, above all. People with all sorts of physical or emotional or mental challenges as the victims, and the elderly, the infirmed. And this just undoes me, Robert.
Yeah, as a parent, this is one of our worst nightmares. Children are our hearts outside of our body. And when they are away from us, you have to just put faith that they're going to be safe and secure when they're in these types of environments, when they're in school or what have you. So when we have our children with people that we have entrusted to watch over them, and then these people betray that trust, this is one of those cases that when we say in terms of, shocks the conscience, one of those cases of where people can get behind in terms of what's right, what's wrong, And one of these cases of where we say as parents that we are always afraid that something like this could happen. And when we're talking about children, not only those who are vulnerable, but children who are special needs, who we can say are in a more vulnerable situation because they can't properly articulate what is happening, this is an especially frightening case. And but for video, this is something that could have been swept under the rug, so to speak, or where the suspect would not have been identified or properly charged.
And the parents knew something was wrong. They knew something was wrong because their children would come home with bruises that were unexplained. And the parents contacted the school district saying, did something happen today at school? Did something happen today at school? And, so they are in writing, right, making it clear to the school, something is wrong. I need your help. And they're like, no, nothing happened at school today. And maybe that is accurate. Nothing in school that anyone saw had happened, but this was happening on the school bus. So again, my God, to do this to a child. All right, let's get into the details here in the video. Police say that the assaults occurred on this dedicated bus, which was provided by the Littleton Public School system to take students to and from the Joshua School, a school specializing in working with children with autism and other challenges. Very highly regarded school in the area. Now, Kiara was hired as a paraprofessional on the bus back in August of 2023. And the Littleton School District says that she underwent reference checks and a background check prior to her employment. The parents of at least 3 children who have autism all reported these mysterious injuries that they saw on their children going back to September. She's hired in August. The bruises and the injuries begin in September. Okay, we're in May, and all of this finally came out in March of this year. Look how many months it took for the police and the school to figure out what was going on. And in those months, what do you think was happening to these children? The delay in getting to the bottom of this further endangered these children.
Right. That's like every day they're on the bus with the same person. They're on the bus with their abuser. And, something we can say investigations take time, but as a parent of a young child, when there's something wrong with your child, how your child looks when they leave out that morning and your child comes home and has scrapes and bruises that they didn't have before, that something is wrong and you're always wanting to try to get to the bottom of it.
This is serious. This is just so serious. So finally, the police and the parents, they get access to the school bus. Obviously they're focusing on the school. And frankly, I think if I were a parent, I too would be focused. I'd be focused on the school because that's where the child spends the most amount of time. And I don't know why, but I, as a parent, I think I would gravitate toward focusing on that. But really what was happening was it was on the school bus. What's interesting here is, now remember, the children are not verbal, therefore they cannot express what is going on. Oh my goodness. I get so upset with this video, and I'm going to describe it. So it was March 19th that finally it was confirmed what was going on that school bus, according to police and Dax's parents. Okay. So for those of you who are listening, Dax is sitting by the window of the school bus, and he is strapped in. The aide is sitting next to him. She's on the aisle. It's a small seat. There is nothing in the video that indicates that Dax maybe tried to get out of his seat or was doing anything. Not that that would in any way make this any better. I'm just simply trying to say that it's, there's no excuse here of like, oh, he tried to leap out of his seat and maybe, she tried to force him back into his seat. That is not what happened here. There's nothing that Dax is doing. He's just sitting there looking out the window like every kid on a school bus. And then you can see her elbowing him, punching him. And this is the part that I can't take this part. Dax doesn't do anything to defend himself or react because he doesn't have those abilities. You know how someone would automatically shield themselves from danger or put an arm up to stop? Dax can't do that. And that at its core kills me. It just kills me. So Dax's parents felt very strongly that this video should be released so you could see Dax's face. They didn't want anything blurred out. They want people to see what happened on that bus. And you know what? That takes a lot of strength, and I appreciate that. And then you see the pain in the parents.
The torture and torment of my sweet boy could have been stopped.
My son does not have the ability to tell me when someone's hurting him. My son does not have the ability to tell me that he was forced to watch someone hurt his friends.
It's ugly to look at, but it's important to see how confused and afraid he was in that video.
So the Littleton public school system says that they were not aware of this until March when Dax's mother came forward. And then they say they conducted an internal investigation, and that's when they figured out what was going on the bus, and then they fired Kiara, and that they notified the police. Okay, all right. They apparently did all of that. But the parents are saying they raised their concerns at least 6 months earlier. And that to me is the problem. For me, this is one of the big problems here. So on April 4th, Kiara was arrested on a charge of assault, and then a day later she posted $5,000 bond and was released from the jail. And then last week, prosecutors announced that they were filing 10 additional charges. So now she has a total of 11, representing 9 felony third-degree assaults on an at-risk person and 2 misdemeanor counts of child abuse. So I'm glad they increased the charges.
Yeah, and I think based on the number of charges, so I may have misspoke earlier. So it's 2 misdemeanors and the rest are felonies. I think she is exposed to some jail time, and whatever offer they make I'm sure is going to probably have a component of some jail time and then followed by some form of supervised probation and or counseling.
I'd really like to hear from all of you what you think justice is going to look like in this case. Well, instead of comments this week, everyone, we have a special guest, our friend, frequent guest to the program, former Middle Township, New Jersey police officer Rich McHale, who's here to update us on this incredible walk along the Appalachian Trail. You're doing this, Rich, to bring awareness to the case of 11-year-old Mark Heimbaugh, who disappeared, there he is, over 30 years ago. And you said to us last time you were on the program, you were going to do this walk to raise awareness. I've been following you on this walk, on your journey. I know you've lost a ton of weight.
I was down 40 pounds, but I took a quick week off to come home and hit a couple of doctor's appointments. And I think I ate 10 pounds back in the 5 or 6 days I've been off the trail. But yes, you do lose a lot of weight. If you're burning 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, I'm only taking in 2,500 to 3,000 calories. And I'm not a mathematician, but it's pretty obvious you're going to lose weight.
So how has it been? You're taking this, how long have you been walking for, and how far did you get?
Okay, so I started in the beginning of March, and for a couple of reasons. One, I've never hiked before, so I'm not an experienced hiker. And 2, my plan was to hike my way into shape. And I did a little training beforehand, but some people really are in the gym 4 or 5 days a week and they're running, and I didn't do that. And one reason why was because I was going to commit to this all summer long and fall. So I didn't want to take up the months before that as well. So my plan was to hike my way into shape, which means my progress was going to come at a slower pace. I started at Springer Mountain in Georgia, which is they call it the southern terminus. The northern end, 2,200 miles north, is in Mount Katahdin in Maine, and that's called the northern terminus. And basically, you can get on anywhere. You can section hike. You can do it. There are no exact rules to do it. They just have labels. The hiking community has labels, and they call this a through hike. And generally, the most common method is to get on in Georgia and hike your way northbound to Mount Katahdin, Maine. They call that a NOBO, northern hike, northern direction hike, and that is what I'm doing. I been at this for 2 months. That doesn't mean I've been hiking for 60 days straight. There are some days off that I took in between there.
But you slept out. I mean, you were kind enough to send us some photos for those who haven't been following, and we're going to show them to people. But you were hiking the trail and then sleeping on the trail. I saw your setups there. This hasn't been easy, Rich.
Yeah, no. It's really a test of your will. You hike. You have to feed yourself, whether you cook food or bring prepared food. And prepared food would be Star-Kissed packs of chicken, packs of tuna fish, peanut butter. A common meal is to take tortilla shells and put tuna fish in there and roll it up. That's a meal. A lot of younger hikers their go-to are a lot of sugar products, cookies, potato chips.
That's what would be in my backpack.
and you know what? I'll say to your viewers when they get the chance later, if they go to YouTube and look up AT or Appalachian Trail through hikers, there's, I don't know the number, but there's 40, 50, there may be 100 or more people who have completed the trail.
Doing this because of Mark Heimbaugh, who was 11 when he disappeared in 1991. Every time you post a picture, you've got a laminated photo of Mark that you carry around your neck. There it is. And I mean, it both warms my heart and it breaks my heart at the exact same time. This case has haunted you. You want an answer, especially while his parents are still alive, while we all have breath. There has to be a way to solve this case. This is a very out-of-the-box way, Rich, without question, to get attention for a case that's been cold for 3 decades. Is it working? Is it working, your method?
The awareness is 1,000% working. 2 people on the trail. I don't go around saying, "Hey, look at Mark Heimbaugh." I wear it. If people ask me about it, I'll stand there as long as they'll let me and explain the case and what I'm doing with it. And 2 people were involved in church groups. They actually stopped me and prayed for Mark and prayed for his. I mean, it's such a humbling experience. Another ironic twist in this: Mark Heimbaugh's 4th grade teacher, Juanita Noe, retired from Middle Township and moved to North Carolina. And she's actually been my sponsor through the Smoky Mountains.
Oh my gosh.
Her and her friend Henry, they've been gracious. They've cooked for me. They allow me to take showers. And that's very motivational for hikers because, like you were indicating, I'm totally self-sufficient. I get on the trail. I cook for myself. I clean myself the best I can. Usually with wipes on the trail, but after
that's enough detail there, Rich.
5 or 6 days, after 5 or 6 days, you need a shower.
Oh, heavens, yes.
And Henry take me in. They let me use their shower and get a good night's rest and then get me back on the trail.
Rich, I want to bring in Robert Corbett, who's been on the program today. I know you two haven't met. It's really funny. You all probably think that Rich and I have met. We've never met. We have never physically met. We've talked on the phone for years and on Zoom for years and tried to work to solve Mark's case, but we've never physically met, as I've never physically met Mr. Corbett. Robert, I'm curious about what you think about this, because clearly Rich is motivated, dedicated, and thinking out of the box. How can I get attention for Mark? What are your thoughts or questions for Rich?
Yeah, Rich, Rob Corbett, nice to meet you. And
Thanks,
I think
Robert. Nice to meet
it's
you.
admirable. Oh, yes, sir. I think it's
Thank you.
admirable because when you have these type of cases, cold cases, we can say that every avenue or lead has been exhausted. But what you are doing, as you said, is bringing awareness back to it. So you can have people who may have thought at the time things they may have known or seen probably didn't amount to much, but now you're bringing this back to the forefront, and people who may have had information can say, okay, well, I didn't think it was valuable at the time, or even in terms of it wasn't the people I was talking to, they weren't as receptive. But now we have, more people being involved on it. We have more investigative tools at our disposal that I think what you're doing in terms of it's going to eventually turn up something. And then it just be in terms of, how people can proceed with it. Question that I have is that when we have cold cases, sometimes we say, well, what Rich is doing, bringing awareness, but they can be dormant at the lead or original investigative agency. Are there a team of detectives or a detective of who you can be in contact with and they can filter through any additional leads, or does more just need to be done before they can say, okay, we can dedicate a person to try to look at this or even reopen it or go through any leads that may come through?
That's a real valid point, Rob. The abduction occurred in 1991, and there was a strong investigative effort for 10, 12 years. And then I think the detectives really became exhausted, if you can imagine, running at full speed for a lot of years. And I'm talking local detectives, the state police, FBI. And I feel there was a period where that dormant stage did take over. And even myself was complacent in directing energy and attention to this as I became more involved in it towards the end of my career. And from that time until today, it's all been about awareness, getting leads. And as you know, because I don't have that investigative power anymore, what I do is I have gotten a number of leads come to me directly, and I have personal contacts with the prosecutor's office and Middle Township Police, the lead agency, and anything that I get goes simultaneously to both of them. And I unfortunately don't know the results of what happens from that point, but any information, and I feel like since the release of my book in 2021, we've gotten several very strong leads that may actually have some factual basis to them. And all I can do is turn them over. I do have that connection, and we do have some great people that are still involved with Mark's case. And one last thing before I shut up, the prosecutor's office, Middle Township Police, the state police, even the Philadelphia Police Department, where this case led, which is 100 miles away from here, has a detective assigned to Mark Heimball's case. It's technically a cold case 33 years later. Well, we have detectives actively assigned to follow leads or respond to leads or continue looking into it themselves. And we added artificial intelligence gathering that those 8 officers are working on in addition to the lead. So a lot of cases, they go on a shelf after a number of years. Mark Heimball's case, if it did do that, it's been off the shelf and it sits on several detectives' desks to be looked at.
And this is my Mark Heimball book, which I have here all the time. And it's got, lots of information, and it's got timelines and police reports and, photos and you name it. And we have tried so hard with the help of Luis Bolaños, who many of you know, just trying our best. And while Rich has been on this hike, any tips that end up coming to me or end up coming to Luis, we of course always send them to Rich first. and waiting on his direction. Look, I'm just going to say this because I can. I think some of the tips that have come in the last 2 years directly to us appear to be very credible. And I am very frustrated with the
Police
prosecutors
response?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm trying to be polite because they're your brethren here. But you know, Rich, I am trying to be both respectful, but I also feel that I just don't feel that there's a fire in everybody's belly to get this thing done. Robert, is it possible that this is not a solvable case? I mean, really, when we think of reality, can't these cases be solved?
Yeah, I think they can. When you say, is it possible that it can't be solved? It's certainly possible, but there is information out there. There's someone who knows something. There's someone who has spoken to someone and has gotten this type of information. And when Rich was talking about in terms of, now using AI, sometimes the problem is that left hand might not know what the right hand is doing. And you have to have someone or these tools that can bring this information all together, and then people can see how these pieces are supposed to fit together. But the information is out there. People or a person, they know something or have spoken to someone who was involved.
Yeah. Rich, it is a pleasure to see you. When do you get back out on the trail again in your walk?
Well, Sunday I'll be. I have rented the car to come up here, 11-hour drive. Sunday I'm going to get back in the rental car and drive back to North Carolina, where Juanita and Henry are going to get me back on the trail.
Oh, Mr. Corbett can help you. He's in North Carolina. Why don't you pop over there? You can shower at his house. His wife will love it.
Absolutely. Hikers are not bashful. They'll take any help they can get. Any food, any free food, free showers. But in all seriousness, I have a lot of miles to go, and I have to pick up my pace and get moving at this point.
Wow.
There's little history, Anna. There's 14 states, 2,200 miles, and roughly between 6 to 7 months is a typical time frame. October 15th is the last day that you can get a permit to enter Baxter State Park to summit Mount Katahdin in Maine. So there is a numerical deadline on the northern end of that trail.
Wow. Rich, I always have you in my prayers because I know you're out there. It's cold. It's hard. What you're doing is really hard. It's so admirable, as Robert said, what you were doing. I hope we get more comments and leads, and I hope that we can solve the case of this child.
The parallel to Mark's case and the trail is that it's arduous. It's long, but I'm sticking with Mark and I'm sticking with the trail. That's the parallel there. And look, I don't get to end of Maine and we have an answer for Mark. I realize that's not, if that happens, great, but that's not the intention. It's awareness for Mark and the people that are involved to come forward. But, hopefully we get the wheels of justice going here and get an answer. It's a solvable case. This case can be solved.
Agreed. All right. We wish you the best of luck and safety. Rich, is there a place where anyone can follow you on this trail on social media?
I have a Facebook page and there is a page. Yes. Where is Mark is the Facebook page. I have a YouTube page, but I don't have the time to make these videos that some of these thru hikers have done. So I would suggest going to the Where is Mark page, Facebook page, and all the pictures of those the summits and the mountains and the views that you're seeing, they also get sent to Where is Mark, and you can see it there.
Terrific. We're going to link to that. Robert, where can people follow you on social media?
Social media handle is RK Corbett ESQ, and I tend to use the same handle on Instagram and X, formerly Twitter.
Terrific. Thank you very much. You can find me at Ana G News. Yep, put up that picture of Mark. We do not tire enough of this. You can find me at Ana G News. You can find this episode along with other episodes of our podcast. And maybe we can even link to the original podcast we did on Mark's case, because frankly, not that much has changed since we did that a few years ago, Rich, which is what just frustrates me.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also go to our website and you can subscribe to our newsletter. So until next week, this is True Crime Daily, the podcast. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. And as we always say, don't do crime.